Good day and welcome to this week's episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell A, and once again, I'm happy to bring the law and you. Of course, you can stream us live at wesncc.com as well as all social media platforms. Of course, today we are going to deal with a topic, and of course, it is via Zoom because I have an award-winning guest who is a trade union leader as well as a social justice activist. He's Trinidadian as well as Canadian, and his name is Mr. Marcus Thompson. Now, before we get into what exactly this is about, and of course the topic is how can social justice activism produce positive change? And you may wonder why is it that I'm having a guest to speak about what is happening in Canada. But before we start, I want to show you what exactly we are going to speak about. Let's see this clip.
Government alleging decades. We have a breaking story to tell you about this hour. CBC News has learned that Black members of the civil service, the Canadian Public Service, both current and former members, have launched a lawsuit against the government, alleging decades of discrimination that kept them from advancing in their careers.
The suit aims to represent tens of thousands of employees alleging decades of anti-Black discrimination.
The class action lawsuit alleges systemic discrimination toward Black public employees, specifically that they faced discrimination in the hiring process and when up for promotions dating back to the 1970s.
Make no mistake, this is a major development, a significant, a landmark case, $900 million that has implications for organizations and institutions across the country.
Now, who is Marcus Thompson, as the clip states? Well, again, as I indicated, Marcus Thompson, he is an award-winning Trinidadian-Canadian trade union leader and social justice advocate, and he's based in Canada. Now, he was born in Port of Spain and lived in Paparo, Maloney, and Mova. Now, he migrated to Canada as a teenager, and he accredits growing up poor as the reason for his fighting for fair and just society. Now, Thompson launched the largest legal effort in Canada to address systematic discrimination of Black workers in the federal government. And of course, we will speak about this $2.5 billion class action lawsuit that alleges that Canada discriminated against Black workers dating right back to the 1970s. Now, as trade union president, Thompson represents workers employed at the Canada Revenue Agency, which is the equivalent to the Board of Inland Revenue. Let's look at this.
Nicholas Thompson.
Nicholas Thompson.
Nicholas Thompson.
Nicholas Marcus Thompson.
Nicholas Marcus Thompson is a social justice advocate and labor leader known for advocating the elimination of racial discrimination in Canada's public service and labor unions.
The damages that Black workers have faced and continue to face, it's real and it's ongoing. And Black workers need help right now. So there needs to be a unique approach to addressing the traumas that the workers have faced as a result of systemic discrimination. We need to create systems to prevent those damages from continuing. We need to address that by ensuring that our public service is reflective of the Canadians that we serve.
And before I introduce Mr. Marcus Thompson, let's take a break and we'll be right back with Strictly Legal. And we are back with Strictly Legal, speaking with Mr. Marcus Thompson. And before the break, I introduced exactly who he is. And now let's introduce him on the screen in Canada, Mr. Marcus Thompson. Good morning.
Wow, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really an honor to be here. I've seen a lot of prominent legal luminaries on this program, so it's such an honor to join you.
And of course, I am happy for you to be on set here, speaking to us from Canada. So tell us, who is Nicholas Marcus Thompson, for those who aren't aware of who you are?
Well, I'm just an ordinary person trying to take extraordinary steps to impact the world that we live in. I grew up very humble beginnings in the village of Piparo in Trinidad. I lived there for a number of years, and a lot of poverty. We literally lived in the middle of the forest, and it was a very very humbling childhood. I grew up around racism, being born to an East Indian father and an African mother. Those challenges from racism started in my childhood. So the fight that I'm fighting right now is consistent with those childhood struggles starting in Trinidad.
And then you would have migrated to Canada as a teen. And did you start fighting for social justice as a teenager, or tell us the experience in terms of when you migrated to Canada?
Well, actually, just before I attended Morva Laventil Secondary School in Trinidad, and I started advocating for issues starting in my teenage years in high school, and I realized, like, for example, I realized that that I had a strong voice, and then when I migrated to Canada, I quickly joined the labor movement, and I started advocating on issues in the workplace there.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, let's take a break. You're watching Strictly Legal. We'll be right back, and we will get right into what exactly is the Black Class Action. Stay tuned. And we're back speaking with Nicholas Marcus Thompson, trade union leader and social justice activist. So, Nicholas, let's go straight into what we are here about, Black Class Action. Now, tell us, what exactly is the Black Class Action that you would have been, started?
So the Black Class Action is a legal action in Canada that seeks to address systemic discrimination in Canada's public service. It dates back to the 1970s, and it seeks to represent over 45,000 workers in Canada's public service that may have faced systemic discrimination when it comes to hiring and promotions within the public service. So we have launched this legal action against the entire federal government. And many of you viewing today would have heard, really good things about when it comes to multiculturalism in Canada, when it comes to diversity in Canada. And Canada has done a good job at that, but there are significant systemic issues arising out of colonization, European colonization, white supremacy, and what these systems are doing or were designed to do was to exclude Black workers from any type of promotional opportunities or any type of occupation in an executive rank in Canada's public service. So in other words, there's a glass ceiling at the bottom of Canada's public service, and that's where Black workers are predominantly located. We're talking about many Trinidadians and Caribbean nationals that would have migrated to Canada in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and would have joined Canada's public service, would have had that dream of serving Canadians and contributing to Canada. And we have people who worked for the public service for 30 years, 40 years, and have remained at that entry level position and have never received a promotion in their entire life. We have people who have retired from Canada's public service, and they are living on the poverty line.
And it's important to note, if I may, it's important to note that these persons were qualified people, not so?
Absolutely. We're talking about people with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, right? Very educated. And we also know that people come with different experiences and different skills and academic backgrounds, right? So we're not just talking about Black people being excluded. We're talking about qualified Black people being excluded from promotional opportunities in Canada's public service as a result of their skin color. That's the only determining merit in Canada's public service when it comes to hiring and promotions. Black workers are at the bottom of the barrel.
So you've said that you, due to this level of discrimination, you would have filed a class action. When was particularly this class action filed? And if you can probably just pull up how the court document looks with your name in the intertule.
Sure. The class action was filed in December 2020, shortly after the Honorable Prime Minister Justin Trudeau acknowledged that systemic discrimination existed in all of Canada's institutions. So I think that acknowledgement in itself was very important for us moving forward. So the federal government has acknowledged the issue exists across the country, but workers continued to suffer on a daily basis. We're talking about macroaggressions, microaggressions, conscious and unconscious bias, and those things, experts have told us that those things contribute to loss of self-esteem, loss of self-dignity, anxiety, depression. Some workers have even attempted suicide because they just weren't getting anywhere in their careers. They were facing so many barriers. One worker was told by her white manager, "We should go back to the good old days where we had slaves."
Oh.
Right? So that's comments like those are what Black workers face in Canada's public service. And that's why bringing this legal action to bring about a change in Canada's public service that would not just impact the public service, but also the private sector, it's going to set a major precedent for how Black people are treated in Canada.
And of course, due to the faces of the civil service being a certain color, that was the reason for this class action. And if we are to look at how the civil service is, what the body of races that compose of the civil service, what can you say about that?
Well, when we examined the public service of Canada, we realized that there's the glass ceiling at the bottom of the public service. Other racialized or visible minority groups were allowed to get just above that glass ceiling. And the top of the public service was reserved exclusively for white folks, for white people, right? And the images speak for themselves. If we take a look at those images of what the leadership of Canada's public service looks like, the images are very telling. And what I can say is that there are eminently qualified Black workers who have been turned down over and over for promotional opportunities that can fit in these executive roles.
And I think
I can't emphasize more.
Yes, and I think we can look at those images while you are speaking in terms of exactly what is the composition and why is it that we are at this position.
Right? So we're talking here about the Canadian Human Rights Commission. This is the commission mandated to look at systemic, to address discrimination in Canada's public service. And we have absolutely no diversity in the leadership of Canada's public service. If we can move to another image, and this body is very important. We're talking about the National Police Force, right? Or
Yes.
Canada's FBI, right? This is the diversity in Canada's public service. If we continue moving, we'll see from picture to picture of what Canada's public service looked like. And this is not by coincidence. And I'm sure this is not the diversity that Canada markets itself as, that you see or think of Canada as when Canada comes to name, right? So this is exactly what Canada's public service looks like, and we're saying that these images have to change. We're saying that Canada needs to represent the leadership of the public service needs to reflect the people that it serves. And just like the civil rights movement, when we win these rights for Black workers, it'll be one for all other underrepresented groups as well. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The government is moving to diversify the leadership of the public service. It is acknowledging these issues. It has committed to making these changes. It has already amended the Public Service Employment Act and is seeking to review the Employment Equity Act. So significant pieces of legislation that have not been touched in decades are now being amended and reviewed because of the legal action.
And when we use the term Black, are we speaking about persons of Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Canadian, or are we speaking about persons who are non-white? So for instance, you have Asians, obviously they are not Black, they are not white, but they are Black. So in terms of the ethnicity of this action, who are we specifically speaking to?
Well, the class, the definition of the class under the our certification record seeks to identify any Black person of African descent, right, by ethnicity, or Afro-Caribbean, or mixed race with Black. Any race that's mixed with Black is considered part of the class. It would not be visible minorities for other groups. Other groups are benefiting from it because now the focus is on diversifying the public service, and they cannot just do that for Black, so they will include all the other groups. So you have the legal process and you have the process outside of the legal, which is changing the legislation, which is hiring and promotion. So they're consciously taking efforts to do discrimination, anti-discrimination training in the workplace. They're now staffing the staffing boards in the workplace. They're now including visible minorities on the boards, right? So you're seeing all of that diversification where the focus is now on Blacks, Indigenous, and other racialized groups. So everyone is benefiting from the legal process directly and indirectly.
And of course, in terms of the quantum, now we note that the quantum of or rather how much you are asking for, the compensation is 2.5 billion. How have you classified this particular relief or quantum as it states?
Well, we're talking about going back to 1970. How do you put a price on somebody's livelihood? We're talking about generational issues here. We're talking about depression. We're talking about people attempting to take their lives, right? And the figures that we have concluded is as a result of numbers that our experts have put forward. We're able to classify that had I been given a promotion, that my pension would have been at a significantly higher amount. So we're able to calculate loss of salary, pension losses, pain and suffering, all of these losses as a result of being denied opportunities for growth. We're able to put a number on what that discrimination is. And it is an expensive amount. And
Yes.
it must demonstrate that it costs to discriminate against workers. There is a heavy price for discrimination, and that's the deterrent that we're seeking to set here. But it is based on loss of income, loss of pension, and pain and suffering. We're seeking to set up a mental health fund to support workers who have been significantly traumatized. We're talking about serving your entire life and not even having dignity in the workplace, not even being treated fairly, having to go home and deal with all of that trauma with your family, the impact of it on your marriage, on your relationships, on how you parent. It's tremendous.
Now, I've also noted that there are 12 plaintiffs, and of course you are, I mean, obviously it's a class action, but you are representing also persons who are unnamed. Now, in terms of the persons who who will be benefiting from these claims, how many persons who you have identified that, okay, let's say for instance the matter has been disposed of, the judgment was made in terms of damages of $2.5 billion, who will these monies benefit?
The monies will benefit the class members, and we have estimated that from 1970 up until classification, based on the public service numbers, to be around 45,000 workers.
So therefore is it that you have a pool of union leaders, or rather members, who you would have identified so that they can get a bit of the pie?
Right. So not just union members, and that's why this is really historic. We have contractors, non-union members, people in management who were able to get into management, but the barriers that they faced to get into management was really egregious. So we have identified Black workers from across the spectrum, and those numbers that have been provided to us by the Treasury Board indicates that these are the approximate amount of Black workers in the public service. So essentially, every Black worker that served the government of Canada, the federal government, between 1970 could be eligible for compensation.
And okay, eligible for compensation. So therefore, do they have to complete a document? How much they will be eligible for? How are you going to quantify or break down this payout?
And that is an excellent question. In terms of the payout, the court would have to appoint a third-party firm to determine that. And of course, there would be different quantums of compensation depending on how much you're able to substantiate. The court would set those parameters for compensation. So there would be different levels depending on how long you've worked, what your potential losses are. So there would be a calculation, a formula we're creating to show what those potential losses would be. In terms of signing up, once the court certifies the legal action, the government would now be required to provide us with names, address of every single class member across the government. So then the court would when it's certified, that's what the class action does. They don't have to sign up. It makes everybody eligible. People can choose to opt out, but automatically every Black worker would be eligible once the courts certify who the class members are.
So let's make an example. Someone who would have retired if you're saying back in the 1970s, then they would have worked through that period up to retirement, let's say in the 80s or 90s. What will be the idea of compensation for that person today?
Well, so if they worked for 30 years in the public service, right, and they're able to show that in 1990 they were eligible, qualified for a promotion, then we're able to say if they had received that job, right, their pay would have been at this level in 1990. So we're able to quantify from what their actual pay was to what they could have received, plus inflation, plus that pay over 30 years, right? We're also able to establish the promotional cycle between a Black person and a white person and a visible minorities person. So even based on those projections, we're able to show what those amounts could be. And for 30 years, it could be significant. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost income, lost pension. Rondell, I can tell you that your pension in Canada, when you retire, it is based on your best 5 years in the public service. Therefore, if your best 5 years is making $40,000, then your pension is going to be unlivable. If your best 5 years is $100,000, then you'll have a livable pension where you can retire with dignity.
Wow. That is amazing. And of course, in terms of, I know you said the class action would have filed in December 2020. We are in 2021. At what stage now has it arrived at in the court docket?
So we have filed what's called our certification record. This is our official record. And the government must now respond to this. And the government can make it very simple by agreeing to certify. If they agree to certify, it would save us almost 2 years in litigation. If they do not agree, then they're likely to bring a motion to strike it. But the Prime Minister has acknowledged this issue existed. He said that the damages that Black workers face as a result of anti-Black racism, that it's real and that it's damaging.
Because also, I know that there's an article which spoke about it in terms of the acknowledgement of the Canadian government. And I know that you all are in election mode, so maybe this may be an avenue for your current Prime Minister to use that as advantage.
Well, interestingly, the Liberal Party, which is the current government, they have pledged in their election platform to create the mental health fund that we've been asking for to support Black workers. They've also pledged to provide developmental opportunities and career opportunities for Black workers. So I think that commitment alone is very significant.
Yes, it is. And tell us, what is next for Marcus Thompson? I know you would have you were a candidate in the federal election in 2019. Was it 2 years ago, and now it's a snap election again? What's next for you? I know you're doing a lot, so tell us.
Well, my focus right now is on eliminating systemic discrimination in Canada's public service and labor unions. That is my sole purpose, and in terms of future electoral run, I can't say where that will go, but I always envision myself serving in the legislature in Trinidad. So who knows?
I know we spoke about that before. Yes, but Nicholas, I am sure we are all proud of you being a Trinidadian-Canadian doing stuff here, because I know you would have done a lot of work here as well in the background, as well as in Canada. So we are extremely proud of you. Your last words, because we have to close now.
Thank you. Listen, I want to say, and I know there are many Trinidadians who look at your program from Canada, yes, and many who would have served in the public service and are not aware of it. Many Caribbean nationals that identify as Black, would have served in the public service and are not aware of it. I want to encourage you to visit blackclassaction.ca and read the statement of claim. All the information is there, and you can certainly sign up to receive updates on there. And I just want to end by saying together we can eliminate systemic discrimination and diversify, truly diversify Canada's public service for all workers. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come on this program, and I look forward to engaging with you more in the future.
Sure, and of course this also applies locally. I mean, we don't have such a big class action, but there are always matters of judicial review when it comes to discrimination in the workplace or promotion in the public service. We see a lot of that in Trinidad and Tobago. So thank you so much, Nicholas. We are most appreciative. So this is a wrap. You have been watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Before I go, I just want to acknowledge Rajendra Sahadeo Designs for designing this tie as well as this mask that I'm wearing to ensure that we are safe. So thanks once again. You are watching Strictly Legal. God bless.